Yeah, right?
So, preamble, we're talking about the rights and rational thinking of choices. That doesn't sound right, but yeah, you'll pick it up, anyone who's listening.
Yes.
So yes, as you were saying,
what were we saying?
Suicide watch.
Yeah.
No, you can't. You can't take responsibility for what other people do to themselves ultimately. So you can't. You can say, well,
It's
if
a
you
deterrent.
say don't go and kill yourself, then the chances are, they are going to.
I would say, as in that's the thing. So, I can't.
Well, what's the current sort of procedure if somebody attempts suicide? Does the government intervene with this? And put them,
It's a crime, I think. But the thing is, it's like adultery. And
no, but I mean, are they put in an institution or questioned by a or do they?
Oh yeah, no, I think you. Actually, I don't know if you have to see a psychiatrist, but I think you are deemed a risk to people.
Okay, yeah.
Therefore, there will be some procedure in place.
And plus, I mean, there are lines to it because suicide is not something that people have an opinion on. People who are in the situation of wanting to commit suicide, they wanna kill themselves. Now they have there are two sets of these people. One set is the people who are like for euthanasia, who are saying I want to die because they don't have quality of life in terms of that everybody else seems to so apparently have, like paraplegics and stuff like that. And then there is another set of people who are like the 25-year-olds and people like that who are just have under a lot of economic pressure, emotional pressure.
20 to 25.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that group of people, and if those group of people now sometimes the first group of people is different. There are some people who say that okay, you should let them have euthanasia. There are much more of the people who are for euthanasia that are for suicide among the 25-year-olds who have nothing apparent.
Yeah, so euthanasia is a subsect of.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the people who do recognize this urge of suicide, many of them, they have psychologists or psychiatrists, and they go into institutes and they put themselves there, and then they still want to commit suicide, and then it becomes then it's no longer a matter of opinion. It's a matter of they recognize something is wrong with them, and they want them to become what everybody else is.
Do you think it's moral to stop somebody from killing themselves then? Do you think that somebody should
I think if they ask you to, yes. It's not moral. If they ask you to stop me, make me better and make me not want to kill myself.
Yeah. But if somebody really wants to kill himself and doesn't want to be in an institution, just wants to die,
but the problem is I'm also a human.
That person? Yeah,
the problem is I'm also a human, so I know that it's one of our primal instincts not to want to kill ourselves. So I know
that's a theory.
Is it?
I'm not saying that that's something I still consider as is survival instinct still our priority at this stage?
What do you mean by priority?
Well, as in, because they say the fundamental instinct is survival, as in at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to in our primal instincts. So is that still the case with our apparent intellectuality?
I would say to some degree, yeah.
No, that's the thing. I'd still say it is, but it's something I still consider.
As moving on and possibly it's being evolved out.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you may have beliefs that if you commit suicide, then you will go something else and someone else, and you may want to commit suicide that way, and it may seem like you're going, it may be true, of course, I don't know, but you are arguing that by killing myself now, I may be, for example, if I believe that if I kill myself between the ages of 20 and 25, I will end up in a different dimension that is really super awesome, Right. So, do I have the right to kill myself?
Well, I believe that you should always have the right to kill yourself. I don't think.
I think that you should be encouraged to question how you got that belief and what rational
basis you have. That's the thing. This is what I would do, as in.
You can have a rational debate, but I don't think it's fair to detain somebody to the point where they can't choose whether they live or die. I don't think it's fair to institutionalize.
I'd say that depends as well. I know fundamentally I see where you're coming from, and I'd be inclined.
I mean, it's your choice because then at that point, then you can go into the specifics, but you're choosing whether somebody else lives or dies.
No, you're choosing whether somebody else lives.
everyone's going to die, man.
Yeah.
Except that.
No, never. I'm not gonna die. I'm not intending on doing that.
What was it? No, as in the reason why I said it depends is because the implications, and yes, you could say, but it's my life. The implication is greater on myself. The effects are greater on myself,
I'm
whether
not
I live
saying-
or die.
I'm not saying
But-
don't try and talk them out of it.
Yeah,
I
no,
believe
I get that. At the fundamental level, that's the thing. So, I think for me, I'm generally, this is what I was thinking of the last week. I think I'm, not fundamentally, but in my framework of thinking, I go for what I consider the greater good. Now, that doesn't mean you make sacrifices in terms of, on the smaller scale, you can go backwards, because backwards is backwards. But so on the selfish level, I might want to strive really far ahead, but that puts other people at a disadvantage. Or I can say, fine, I won't strive as far ahead. I'll only take what I need to get ahead, and leave the rest of the resources for everybody else to also get ahead. So I could jump way ahead of the crowd, but then I've kind of screwed everyone else over. But for the greater good, if I only progress what I need to do, and then let everyone else progress how they need to, then overall that's the greater good, and overall that will benefit everyone, myself included, so I'm not losing out.
How do you judge how far you need to progress though?
No, so it's just what you need. It's the needs over the wants. So that's the thing. So if I could say, well, I could. Okay, I guess a kind of personal example would be, I could keep my head down, get on with my studies, not try to keep an ear out for what's going on with other people's lives. But personally, I'm uncomfortable with that because I just find that selfish, or how I define to be selfish. Well, one of my definitions of being selfish in that sense that I'm like people
your
say.
studies are more important than somebody else's.
I don't consider myself like at the end of it's always kind of life or death situation that if I were about to die and someone said, would you rather have continued on your studies and got a higher mark, or would you have stopped or like ceased your studies to focus on someone else's well-being, not their studies but their actual well-being? Then at the end of the day, I would say, well, it's an obvious case of I'd rather someone's well-being than my studies, because you could just keep reducing everything away. It's like, what would you rather have, well-being or a good degree well-being? And
Right.
it's just differentials.
Yes,
But
that's true. But okay, so speaking in a world with more than two people, no.
You
You
can't
get
imagine
held.
such a world.
Yeah, what I mean is that usually in these cases, what I'm starting to sort of, I don't know, form in my head is that, yes, all these things is true, but in order, and I know this is something that a lot of people say, but in order to be able to help a certain number of people, you need to be somewhere, right? And of course, you can start helping as immediately as you find out, and perhaps you will help the most number of people, but your help will be less influential. Yeah. So, say say it's like a little slope. Yeah, and it falls down after a certain point. You can keep pushing people a little bit, but if you don't have enough power to push them over the hill, they're going to come back.
Okay, so like if you have it in your power to become like the prime minister, then that would be more helpful to people than just going
As
out
long
and
as
doing
you
charitable work.
maintain perspective.
Yeah. So yeah, as long as you maintain
Yeah,
No,
perspective.
I'm just saying, like, if you're like intellectual enough to go and like really
Yeah.
affect lots of people, and it's better to spend your life, or at least some of your time, not helping people to get to that stage.
Well, yeah,
rather than
Or,
just
you
spending
know,
your
yeah,
time
you
doing
know,
charity
but-
work.
Or it's like if you're a medic
Yeah.
in a war zone and you think, oh, my leg's just blown off. I could treat myself, but there are other people here that need
Yeah.
treating, so I'll go them. But then,
You die.
yeah, so you're gonna have to. As in that's that's the
Yeah.
thing. So
Sort of the same
That's
thing.
much more
You
eloquently
pull
put
people
than
up with you rather than pushing
Yes.
people up in front of you.
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
And also with the prime minister thing, I think there is a limit. I think there's a fundamental, well, not fundamental. I think there's an average limit on where we can. Where is it that we start losing perspective? And I don't know if this can be described in terms of the amount of time that we spend with this much money, or amount of time that we spend with people with this much money, or something like that, or with this many people are in our control, or something like that. But I think there is a limit after which most people will lose their sort of touch with where they came from. And of course, it depends on individual experiences and how traumatic or non-traumatic or good or bad their experiences was. But I think you can describe a average that is not very broad, that is sort of peaked at a certain.
Yeah, the pragmatic limit. That
Yeah.
once they've gone past that.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to find that, and I think so, humanity, some of them should focus on that.
Look
At least.
within before they look outside.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, on like a practical level, is that what you're trying to do? Do you think you're trying to continue your studies to try and help humanity, or? I mean, personally, I'm just, yeah. I was gonna say, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just interested in physics. So
Well,
that's kind of what I.
yeah, like-
That's not true for me either. I mean, I am interested in physics, but I am interested in people as well. But I don't want to help humanity. I just want to help a few people who are around me.
I don't want to help
You
humanity.
know, yeah,
It's a
because
really bad thought.
helping humanity is something that maybe even the president of America or something cannot really affect
But
properly.
it's not the case of one person can't make the difference, but everyone.
Yeah, but
can.
everyone can. So I think, okay, so the most practical way to go towards that is to help the people around you.
Pass it on.
Yeah.
Pay it forward effect.
Yeah, exactly. You don't, you could give too much or too little, I guess. But if the culture is there, then it will average out, hopefully.
But what if you're talking about on levels?
What do you mean?
So, like a pyramid kind of thing. So, when you were saying about like an average limit after which, for the Prime Minister,
Yeah.
as in terms of you lose perspective now, and then what you said about physics, you do it because you enjoy it. But the thing is, if your founding principles are all, let's say, valid, then everything that's built on top of that in the same methodology by default is valid as well.
I don't think it works like that.
But no. If your principles, so say if I just build something from solid brickwork and we're saying the brick is the ultimate thing, then anything I build, so that we've established my foundation is solid, it's fine. And if I build upon that with anything derived from my founding principles, it follows through that it maintains that property.
Yeah.
If it's solely derived from that.
Yeah.
But as soon as I introduce other things, that's when you start weakening it.
Yeah.
But if you always maintain deriving it from your first principles and they're solid, then everything that follows through should be fine.
Yes.
So if
What do you mean in like a less metaphorical sort of
Okay,
sense?
so I was going to say,
I got lost in the metaphor somewhere.
if it's still a metaphor of sorts, but if
Going from
you
bricks to
have your
pyramids.
perspective of how you help people around you, and then you just keep scaling that up,
Just extrapolating.
yeah, it's just levels of a pyramid, so to speak. That it's still built on the same thing, but your scope or your area of effect might be increasing, but because you maintained it in the same thing, all it is, it's a case of nothing's changed except the actual number. So the law is still the same.
Yes.
It's just has an effect.
Yes,
on
but what happens is that you slowly start to lose immediate contact in terms of human contact, in terms of what affects you physically.
Yeah, so
If
you get
you
that's
let
what
that
benevolent.
happen.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't
you
think
have to be
that,
very careful.
and I don't think in some sort of system or something. I think it should very clearly account for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
so
I would say, say I start off as me, and then I help out my community.
yeah.
And then
And then
say
you-
I get married, have a family. That's another fundamental. Well, I would say family is a fundamental unit of society.
Yeah.
And then, so I have to stick to that and maintain that perspective. Still help community, and then say I build on top of that. Then I go into
Yeah,
the
like a
country.
business or something.
The business. And even that's the thing when I think people lose perspective when they just focus on
One aspect.
one of the aspects. But if you just see it as a core pillar that's going through all these levels,
Exactly. But okay, so what I'm trying to say is
Sure.
that yes, if we manage to keep our focus and our sort of view, then it won't. Nothing will happen. You'll be able to still affect a lot of people, and there have been leaders who have somehow managed to keep their perspective at a certain point. I guess at least in certain aspects, like I don't know, Obama with healthcare that he's trying to pass, or with Martin Luther King with certain aspects of freedom that he thought. But they did manage to keep that part of it, but there's so few of them, which means that they only make up a tiny bit of that, bell curve. If it, I guess it's there as well.
Yeah,
Seems to
it's
be
also
everywhere.
possibly just single issues as well. Like, okay, yeah, fair enough. Healthcare is something that Obama's doing well, but then you
Something else is
other
doing
stuff
terrible.
that he's
Yeah.
doing, and you realise that, well, yeah, but you came into power with the principles of, for instance, shutting down Guantanamo, and
Yeah. So
now you've got drones going over.
Yeah,
unmanned drones
exactly. So what I'm trying to say is that we should account for that when we're electing someone for talking politics. When we're electing something, we should account that this person that we're electing is first before everything else is a human. And after that it's a person with determination and leader and that. And we should always keep into account that we shouldn't surpass the limits of ourself. We shouldn't impose limits on the leader that we wouldn't be able to uphold ourselves.
I think, yeah, but you get a problem is so far as, maybe it is that you just don't have one leader then. Like, you have to have a
lot of leaders.
A lot of leaders.
Yeah.
Which would be you have a problem when you have one person responsible for a lot of stuff. I mean, even if you have a solid core whereby I'm going to, I care for people and I'm going to care and continue to care for people, then once you get to a certain point,
so much
and then you can't think about all the implications of your actions. So you can say, well, I'm doing this action, I'm protecting the world. Everybody wants this. They must all want this. Therefore, I am going to, I don't know.
But that's the thing. It's a communal effort. That's
but you end up with somebody in power who can impose, well, all you rich people, you're going to give all your money or a lot of your money to all of these poor people, and it's going to happen now because for some reason I have that power to do that.
Mm.
And you think, well, that's good for everyone, I'm caring for everyone. But in reality, there could be huge repercussions of that decision beyond what I can imagine.
Yeah,
and actually end up wars being started because you suddenly have people that have felt oppressed with lots of money and they want revenge, and then they can get revenge, and you realise actually your action, which is built on solid principles, which is doing good for now all of society, because you are in a position where you can care for the whole of society as a whole because you're that powerful. You've made a decision based on your founding principle of caring for people.
But everything must go through that check. So it's
exactly.
It's slow, but it's thorough. So as in the means must justify the means, and the ends must justify the ends.
But you can't always know the ends.
When you're making a choice. As in the sense that if I would say,
you have to be
I want this outcome, and that's a good outcome, and everyone's like, yeah, we agree that's a good outcome, but that doesn't justify how you if you were to say we think that person shouldn't get into power, so, and everyone agrees that again this is a subjective, but just for the sake of example, and everyone agrees that person shouldn't get into power, so we're doing it for the greater good by not letting that person win, and we're going to make other person win because we all agree, based on a rational analysis somehow, that person is good to be in power. But how we do it, well, we're going to rig the elections, but that isn't justified. So you have to do it, and everything has to follow through. And even if you say, well, I'm going to be honest and just try and raise awareness in the voting population of why we believe that person X is bad and person Y is good, we haven't done anything that is contradictory to our principles or anything. We've stuck to our principles. If people go with it, then hooray, we can consider that a victory, perhaps. If not, we've done our part, and we cannot be held account for anything that goes wrong because we still did good. And again, you might still suffer because person X might still get into power, but this is a subjective thing that depends on each person, I guess. Personally, I would feel I'd much rather that I didn't do anything I thought was wrong, even if it means I suffer, because I would have a relatively clear conscience in the sense that I didn't corrupt myself to try and get a greater good, because then I'm saying I'm above the rules.
Yeah, but what are risks?
But you can take reasoned risks. But should you
So
take it?
you shouldn't take risks, as in reasoned risks.
Oh, I think
Understood.
a risk doesn't necessarily mean breaking a principle.
No, it means potentially breaking it.
In a way, well,
What do you mean?
I would say a risk in terms of, well, here's the most likely outcome, which I want. No, here's the most likely outcome, which is the second best option that I want. Here's a less likely outcome, which is the option that I really want. I'm going to have to make a decision, and one of them cuts off the other. What do I do? But if it was a case of, if there was no negative effect in the terms of, if I don't have to say, for example, if one of them meant I had to lie, so if I had to lie to get my favoured outcome, I wouldn't do it. I would say, well, no, because
Well, that depends on what your favorite. Well, I mean, I don't know you, but like, doesn't that depend on the magnitude of your favorite outcome? So if you had to tell a small lie to save thousands of people, then
but see, that's the thing. So when it comes to saving, at the end
So,
of the
I mean,
day,
I mean,
I think
I'm
I would
using that
value
as an
human. No, like.
so then what it is you are prepared to sacrifice some for like greater morals, I guess.
Yeah,
You
as in
sacrifice some
if it
principles.
was saving lives, I think that's the only exception for me. Saving lives would, I think.
About improving quality of life.
It depends.
Say you can, rid the world of the common cold or the flu or something. Surely you would.
This is what I'm unsure of because, say, down the line in the future, people say, what was our society built upon? And if it's built upon a lie, then I would say by definition it will follow that that society will fail because it was built upon something that
If
is
it's something,
logically invalid.
I still believe that you can have lies for the greater good.
And
I think that all you can try and do is I mean, everyone has their own principles, but I would say you have to go on your principles as to what you think the best possible outcome for most people, I guess, could be. That's a reasonably. I mean, that's not what happens in reality. In reality, people take themselves into account. But I would say that's what I would like to build a society on. So even if that means lying or rigging an election to stop, a really awful leader, then I would say that that's probably a reasonable thing to do, personally.
And I get it, and this is the thing. So I'm not saying we should suffer or we should make our lives difficult, but and again, of course, it's just me. Personally, I wouldn't be comfortable with myself if I did something which I believe was fundamentally wrong.
I
So
don't think there is such a thing.
no, but as in it's how you define it, though. That's what I mean with personal. So there are things which I believe are fundamentally wrong.
Okay.
But so lying for me is my founding principle is honesty. For me, that truth is it just seems the whole logical thing that you cannot have any logical argument if it's untrue. And
Isn't that kind of fundamentally the case?
no, that's the
Because
thing.
it's
So
not
for
a
me,
fundamental.
as in it's kind of inherent in the system. But in terms of morals, I would say that extends to fundamental. You can't build anything if you're not honest. Well, you can build it, but you can't build a solid structure if it's not honest. That's my opinion. And
Okay, so you think it's bad to lie to make people happier?
yeah, as in when someone says, well, I think people don't approach me with this question anymore, not because of my past experience, just if someone were to say, oh, you know when you get those people who post something like the whole typical, oh, I look really ugly in this, or that. Like nowadays, I'll just not pay attention to that. But it became someone explicitly asking me, how do you think I look? I just give my scientific opinion, which would be, I guess by social conventions, you would be aesthetically pleasing, blah blah blah, kind of thing. Personally, I would disregard the appearance before.
So you wouldn't explain why the question is rigged.
No, I would explain. That's the thing. But this is the thing. So people now just won't talk to me about anything that's just a kind of oh, don't stop it. kind of thing.
Okay.
Well, I would think, what I would like to do is stop time at this point, and then kind of think about the total happiness that could be gained by everyone in the world by either saying,
But how do you define it?
I don't
How
know.
do you measure it?
Well, you can roughly say whether, as in whether I said this person looked, good or pleasing or bad. I would try and think whether, both think about the happiness that both would lead, and then
Say you came up to me and said, "Oh, I've done some research on this aspect of physics or something. What do you think?" And if I could see that you've put a lot of effort into it, but I thought it was wrong, as in, like,
I guess I would hope that you would tell me it was wrong.
see, that's the thing. So personally,
Yeah, but
I
that's
would
different.
but I would say in terms of principles, it's the same structure.
No, but you have to use a different set of principles when you're talking about something that's opinion, rather
Yeah.
than research.
Something on
Do
opinion
you?
then.
Yeah, because then your principles are too general, like a restaurant that offers steak and Chinese food. You know what I mean?
That sounds like a good idea.
You know what I mean? Like, so you can't use the same set of principles
But then
to
why would they be
criticize.
principles? But can you have grand principles?
Okay, so I don't think that I know that to a degree that our brains aren't, physically at least, structured in a pyramid type thing. It's more like a web type thing. So and I think our thinking is like that as well. That's why sometimes people, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I think that's why sometimes people can argue with you, and in their head they're using two different sets of assumptions when they argue with you. And to them it makes sense, because that's how it works. That's how it works in their head. Now,
No, go.
I think that when somebody tells you, I look terrible in this, or something like that, they themselves know that they don't look that terrible. They're just trying to ask you what you think, but they also want to hear you say good things.
So if someone asks your opinion, they
I mean,
just want
that's
to hear their
somebody
opinion
fishing.
from someone
Well,
else.
that's
Well,
somebody
yeah.
think
I'm not saying that's always the case.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
phrasing the question in a way to try and get you to answer in a way that they would like to hear.
Yes,
Because-
but they're not fighting with you. They're your friend, or they're your, there's something like that. So if you recognize this, if you realize that they are trying to ask for support rather than trying to ask for an
Genuinely
opinion.
ascertain.
Yeah.
They just want.
Because our language, I always feel like our language is inadequate to describe our emotions. Because if I said, like, do you think that I look good?
No, I wouldn't
Wait,
say.
wait. If I said that do you think that I look good? But in honesty, what I want to ask you is, I would like you to support me with my looks right now. That sounds weird to say.
But the thing is,
But that's not.
if
That's
you're
not a
lying
language.
just to make them feel better, then what does that imply about your state?
No, but you're not lying.
No, but as in, say you don't really think it, but you're just saying it, oh, I want them to feel happy. Okay, so, I'm fine. Not the scientific things. I'm sorry,
Okay, go
stepping
on.
back.
All right.
Say you made a poster about something.
Yes.
I don't mean the scientific, but just like,
Yeah.
you made some piece of art. Well, art's incredibly subjective. Say you made a poster. and,
Darren, can it be wrong or not? Objectively.
Like a
That's-
membership
yeah.
card for society.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Is Aaron making you a
No,
membership?
I
Wait, are
make
you
my
trying to
membership
construct things off
cards
which is
myself.
objectively right and wrong, or not?
Yeah, well, as in that you... No, as in...
Is it
So
subjective or
say
not?
you make a poster and you say, I think this is a really good poster. It gets the information across that I want it to get across, but it's still very aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Visually, I think it looks good. And then I could say, personally, I might say, like, say it was really colourful but cluttered or something.
Okay. So it
but
didn't convey the information, but it is aesthetically pleasing.
yeah.
Okay.
And then you said, oh, I'm really proud of this. Like, it's a good poster. What do you think? And then I might think, well, he's clearly fond of this. He's put a lot of effort into it, and I appreciate that effort, and I can see that. But I would still make tweaks. Personally, that's what I would think. So in my head, I would be thinking, I like it, but it's not what I would have done because I think there are problems. Now, instead of just saying, yeah, it's really good and making you feel good about it, just to make you feel, and say you were feeling like, I really hope he gives it the thumbs up or something, because I'll feel kind of down if he says there is something wrong with them. Now, if I did say everything's fine, and I didn't mention the fact that I thought there are some flaws, later down the line, say when you put this poster up,
Yeah.
people
Okay,
could
so-
criticize it,
okay.
and then you feel worse, and you could then come back to me and say,
Why
loads of
didn't
people
you
have
say
said this.
So-
Why have you not done
So
it?
my question now is kind of, so you're saying like it doesn't do its job. So what if it kind of does its job fine in that it conveys information, but it just doesn't look aesthetically pleasing? Because then
No, that's the thing.
then
I would
it's
just
like-
give
it's
you
a
a
different-
critical.
Yeah, right.
That's the thing.
So,
That's why I would do it. It's not a case
okay,
of.
so you wouldn't. So it's
Yeah.
the same scenario.
Yeah, I
It's-
wouldn't say you're wrong. It's a bad poster. I'd just say these are the things that I think
Yeah.
are good. These
Okay,
are the,
so-
that's the thing.
But
This-
I
yes.
haven't phrased it. If I phrased it in such a way that was going, my poster's really awful, isn't it? Then you kind of feel like
Yeah.
no, but I wouldn't say it's.
it's a
I
different,
would look at
that's a
good and
different
bad.
question. That's like because my mood is changing.
yes, it's a different question, and that's the important bit. That's what we have to recognize when we're talking
Yeah.
to someone.
I
Is
think I
the
just
emotion?
translate everything in my head.
Yeah, okay,
So
but
that I just like, right, what is he saying objectively? What are they saying objectively?
yeah, but that's
Can I
not
go back
always
to
the
your
case.
language point.
Yeah, the language
Okay,
point
so
is.
you were saying before that we don't have the language to express our emotions. I would disagree with that. I would just say that it's like a cultural thing.
Yeah.
So I think I personally think that people should be more open about
Yes.
just everything. So if I say, can you, if I ask you the question, I think people should be more open to saying, can I have something complimentary? Please say something complimentary about me,
Yeah.
rather than phrasing it in this kind of camouflage.
Yeah, of course.
To look bad in
But
this.
that's how we work. I mean, our language is not only our vocabulary. Our language is,
Okay, sorry.
you know,
I was
everything.
just-
I meant like how we
How we
communicate.
articulate.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's
And
kind of a politeness thing as well, in terms of, well,
But politeness for the sake. Okay, personally,
Yes,
I disagree with
well,
politeness for
okay,
the sake of politeness.
okay, no, but no.
Really? Why?
To continue that point, it's kind of, you can't ask somebody, like, I think I look quite good in what I'm wearing today, but I really need some affirmation of that.
Yeah.
So could you please give me some affirmation?
yeah, you
that I
can't
look
do that.
good today?
Exactly.
You can't do that because then, well,
Then
okay,
I'd like
so,
to live in a
so Ridwan
society where that's
tells
the
me
case.
So
you look really good
Yeah,
today,
of
Max.
course.
Yes, and then
Well,
I
we
think, but that's exactly what I asked Ridwan to say. So all he's done is repeated the words that I gave him.
That's the thing. You've highlighted the problem itself in the sense that, well, what I would deem the problem itself, that if you said I need external affirmation for this, fundamentally, I would probably not. It would depend. If someone just came up to me and said, do you think this looks good or something, and I could tell they needed, or they felt that, I would say they felt they needed external affirmation for them to be acknowledged and verified and looking aesthetically pleasing or something,
Well-
then I would say you don't need. I would hope to get to the conclusion that.
So would you just say you don't really mean that question? What you really mean is
Well, yeah, as in this is the thing. So I'd have to gauge it on the person and
Yeah.
how I thought. But eventually, the end goal I would have in with that problem, that situation would be. You don't need me or anybody else to validate you.
Yeah.
in
Okay.
whatever
Exactly.
aspect.
So.
That's what at the end of it. So that's the whole thing in terms of asking for an opinion. I would only ask for a critical, objective opinion that's well informed. I wouldn't say, which is kind of problematic in a sense, because sometimes you can feel really down and ask someone. You just want to hear that external affirmation, but then, for me, because I know in my head that, well, all I'm doing is I'm just asking because I want someone to verify it, but if I can verify it myself, or if I can't, that is my answer anyway. Then I know whether
of course,
and
but,
it doesn't matter what.
but that doesn't go into. I mean, at least in my head, when I am emotionally vulnerable.
Listen, I was trying to remind like that's the thing I
Yeah.
just have is like, all right, I'm emotionally compromised.
Yeah.
Go back to my rules. This is what it says. Stack, stack, stack. This is the outcome.
Yeah, I know, and
But
I
sometimes
try to do
social-
that.
you're just like I'm
But
emotionally
sometimes
vulnerable.
social
Tell them what.
interaction is better than the rules. You can tell yourself these are my rules, but they're still in your head, and
I
sometimes
know
you
that
need
that's the thing.
you
So
need external input sometimes.
at which point that's why it helps, and this is I think why people have the whole. If there was no difference of opinion, you could say it would be very bland, and I'm not saying that's what to go for or that's the definite outcome, but then you could also say, if you hang out with like-minded people, that could be in the sense that, okay, I'm emotionally compromised, I can't pay attention to my rules because I'm emotionally compromised, but you're hanging out with, or your company is people who have the same rules anyway. That they will. So say I thought, right, I want to go down. This is my path that I walk, and then at some point it gets really difficult, and I think, oh, this is so difficult. I'm going to go off the path. I'm going to go off the rails. And then say you guys say, no, I know this is hard, but stay on the rails. What you're doing is right.
But that's
you don't
exactly
have to change it. It's hard, but you're on the right path. Don't worry.
But what you're describing is the exact same scenario of somebody saying, "I look bad in this," because that's what they want. They want confirmation from somebody who, when they're in their right frame of mind, thinks similarly to them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like the same
I
example.
disagree.
Well, they could be in a position where
Because if
they could be thinking two things at the same time. So I'm looking in the mirror. I know really it all comes down to looks, which is a weird kind of topic
This
to be
is
on anyway. But it could be anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know I look good, but I feel for some reason I look really bad. Like even though I know objectively, I think I look good. I also feel that I think I look really bad. And I've got all this going on in my head, and it's two things, and I'm not quite sure which one's real anymore. And I know that I think that I do look good, but then I feel like I don't look good. And all I really need is I just need somebody to just tell me which voice in my head is right.
yeah, so
But
you
I
need
would
to
say
like-minded
logic
person.
always. This is the thing. So
but logic can warp what your brain.
it comes down to
Because
like archaically you could say it's heart and mind, as in your thoughts and your feelings, which is why I always say thoughts and feelings. But I would say they shouldn't conflict. They should be in harmony, and that's a goal we have internally. That we need to get them both into harmony.
but the
That
problem
they
is that
complement each other.
but when you're in a kind of so say you spend your whole life and you think you look good, and then or objectively, like basically Max's scenario, and then but then if you're feeling emotionally vulnerable, you think, maybe I've been wrong all of these years. So I would say that you can't what you think before
I know,
when
but
you're
that's
emotionally
what you
vulnerable. I'm saying there is no absolute logic. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because
So
Yeah,
so,
and it
so what
does-
I'm saying is this is why you can't trust your brain.
But no, but that's at that point. That's when. So say I have say I thought objectively all this time, I look good or I look whatever.
Yeah.
And then I hit like a snag or something, and my emotions kick in and say, "What if you've been wrong?" Like the insecurities come in, and then I think, "Oh, okay." My response is right. Think about this objectively, and then what am I doubting about myself? Is that right or wrong? And if it's wrong, then I have to think it through again and think, okay, well, let me go through this. So again, I'm not saying that's how it is for everyone.
No, but is your mind not warped by emotion? Like theoretically, you can be if you're in an emotional state, then your entire perception of
But that's
everything
why I
that you
bring it
thought
back
up
to
till
reason. So
But what do you call reason?
logic, and
But
logic
then-
is absolute.
But if you think you're going by sound logic, I mean, we're saying looks are like an objectively good thing. This is why it's kind of confusing.
Well,
for some, but,
so one way I get around that is not get around to get through, is I rarely manage to do this anymore. But write down your thoughts and feelings.
the problem is you don't know whether you were correct before or you're correct now.
Yeah, but as in if you put it down, you can objectively analyze what you've written. Well, I don't actually do that because I do that in my head, but
Okay.
it's just the whole
But I
idea
can write,
of,
I look good.
yeah,
and analyze it.
you can
But
actually.
sometimes you question your own objectivity.
Yeah.
I know, but that's the thing. If it's logical, it's based. So if
And it's
I know
even more-
looks as a, as you
But
said,
this is
it's a
very
subjective
difficult because
thing, but-
examples with emotional insecurity tend to come out with tend to come from subjective things. So looks, for example.
Yeah.
And because looks are a subjective thing, then you can end up feeling very insecure, and then you can be like, well, all
But
of my logical analysis of what I've written before could all be wrong because it's a subjective matter.
But if you've based, that's the thing. You have what personally I try my best to reduce everything to objectivity. So let's say with looks, now social conventions, I'm very accepting of the fact that I'm low on the scale if there's some scale by social conventions. And there was a time when that kind of bothered. I used to think, well, I'm not attractive, but then I thought, that's a completely subjective. Objectively, I am relatively healthy, and that's all that really counts. As in, and I don't mean even in terms of mating and whatever, and in terms of biological thing. I just mean I am healthy. That's fine by me. Do I know? Do I have an identity? So, guys, because I think in this society there is a whole image focus in terms of, or how you look. It seems that sometimes more importance is put on how you look rather than who you are. And that might sound like a very obvious thing to say, but that's the thing. I would say it's a fact of the matter. But I started getting to the point where I thought, well, I'm just being subjective. As in, yeah, I will work on my appearance at some point, but there are so many other things that take priority, and objectively, I know I need to work on, and that's what. Why am I worrying about something which I know ultimately is a subjective thing? Some people might think, oh, he looks ugly. Some people might think, oh, he looks attractive. But it's a subjective. That's the thing, because if different people can think different things, then it's a subjective thing. Or as I'm presuming they're all being natural. But
So the problem, and maybe
We're
the
gonna come up
solution is that sometimes, yeah, it is a subjective thing, but many people, like artists, they sort of give themselves into public opinion, well, not public opinion, but that subjectivity. They sort of would like to be recognized, although they are aware that it's completely subjective. And if you tell them, I don't like your music, they'd be like, you don't understand it, or something like that, implying some sort of objectivity that my music is actually good, but you're just not seeing it. But yeah,
shut the non-believer.
yeah, exactly. So what happens is that there are a lot of people who do want that, do want to be sort of subjected to good subjectivity from other people's thoughts. I mean, me included, of course.
Well, yeah, everyone wants. That's a
it's-
human thing.
Yeah, I think it's,
Yeah.
It's the product of our instincts.
tonight.
Yeah, and
Probably
it's
right,
not
but-
only like that though. It's not just only a product of our instincts. It's an imperfection into it. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that okay? So usually when I
Can we rise above the imperfection?
but it's not an imperfection. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like okay.
Well,
So maybe
can
this
you
is
rise up? If you say it's intellect versus desire, you can say so. Intellect would be objectivity. Desire would be subjectivity.
okay.
In terms of
No, but I think they should be in harmony.
yeah, no,
I
that's
mean-
the thing. You have to get it to the point. Well, when I say have to, I'm talking about for my
Yeah.
personally. This is what I impose upon myself. You have to get them into a harmony where they are in moderation of each. So it's not a case of outright cold logic. To say it's cold,
Yeah.
that's a subjective
Yeah.
thing. But outright logic. So have you guys seen iRobot?
Yeah.
So okay, there's a bit where his grudge against robots is because the robot saves him
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
the girl.
Yeah.
Again, that's a subjective thing in the end, but it talks about that being just a complete difference engine.
Yeah.
So that's complete logic and objectivity. And then subjectivity, you would say, save the girl, not him, because she's a little child. And yeah,
I mean,
But-
the thing I would argue about this is that kind of in that perfect world, I would have liked to. I mean, the whole reason that the robot's saving someone is because that's what the society wants the robot to do, right?
Yeah.
If society wanted the robot to save the kid, though, that I
It
feel
would
like
be
that could have been coded in.
Yeah.
That would have just been like one line.
I know,
Yeah,
but
age
again, the whole,
proportionality.
I think one of the things was from the principles, because that's what, I haven't actually read iRobot, so I'm just talking about the film.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, I feel like society, when they're coding these robots, they would code them to do what an average person would do in the scenario, or what most people would want somebody to try and do in the scenario.
Well, no, because it's a three laws thing, as in that's what whole Asimov
Yeah.
approach was.
Yeah, and I think that actually, if you are going to code an artificially intelligent robot, then in reality you're going to give it artificial intelligence. You're not going to code in any given situation. So when you see a man and a little girl and they're both in danger, then
You
you
go for the
will
little
always
girl.
say the little girl. That's not something you can code in.
Yeah,
So what you really
give
do
it a
is
friend.
you program a logical machine who will act logically given
But
a
I
set
think,
of
like,
scenarios.
Yeah, I know,
You
but
say,
I mean, like in that scenario, I think the robot could have judged that the child was more important, arguably.
No,
Well,
but that's the thing.
yeah, but I
they
think
say
that
it's a
they-
difference engine, and his survival post, like they both crashed and were injured,
Yeah.
and he was much more likely to survive
Yeah.
if recovered than she would be. So you could say, well, two people. So it could be that the robot saves the girl, and then they both die anyway. And people would be like, why'd you do that? Because he had much higher survival chance. And
Well, I
then-
mean, like that's. Yeah, I mean.
that's because they say it's a
It is a
different
purely
system.
logical machine with a set of parameters that it has to function based on. Well, 3 laws.
Okay, so yeah, going back to
Robot is
the
actually a very good one for discussion at some point because it talks about 3 laws and then how those laws are implemented. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying now, but
okay,
Something to bear
but
in
you
mind.
know, I don't know, but I think most likely if it was a human in that place, it would save the girl. Because
Well,
that's
yeah,
how
I mean,
we
this is-
think.
But
This
it
is
would be,
what I'm trying
that
to
would
get-
be something where our logic doesn't
Yes,
necessarily
exactly.
come into it. It
You could
is
still
more
put
of
that
our
in.
instinctive.
I think you could
In
still go to in
humans.
to do the worse.
In humans.
No. Like, I mean, what I would hope that the robot does is kind of just go in with, like, if everybody. So what do you think that the robot was right, or would you prefer to live in a world where the robot saved the girl, or
well,
I
but
don't
that's
know.
the thing. Logically, it went for what is, as in
Yeah.
Saving the most
pragmatically,
Yeah,
lives.
but I'm
it
just
went
saying,
for the
like,
most
you-
practical solution.
yeah, I know, but I'm saying like you could code it in so that it factors in the age of the person and factors that way above the other percentages. Of the,
Right, so it's something like that
would
goes.
you want to live in?
Right. So what? Okay. And would I want to live in that society or this society? I don't think it would be much of a difference, to be honest. Because
I
I
think it would.
really,
Yeah.
you think it would
Well-
be a difference if?
Well, because one is supposedly fundamentally based just on logic,
yeah.
and the other one is logic and then accounting for human subjectivity.
But
Yeah,
I would argue
but-
that the whole
okay.
thing is just human
Wait,
subjectivity.
wait,
That's
wait,
what it's going for. I mean, we've programmed the robots to try and but we programmed the robots because we want to be saved, right? If we wanted the girl to be saved, if everybody wanted the girl to be saved in that scenario,
But that's the point. Everybody together, they think logically on average. Okay. Because I think all of our emotions cancel out at some point.
Well, this is why it's good to have many people in.
Yeah.
rather than just-
So that's why
But-
you have objectivity.
Yeah, but what I think is that if you have a human who doesn't interact with other humans, like born, that idea that's
Kid
isolated
in a
human
box.
being, yeah, that human would be retarded.
Well,
I think that's a strong word, but
Yeah.
I think I
What do you
understand what
mean?
you're saying.
What,
That
like, sorry.
Retarded.
Describe your
I presume
scenario.
You're not talking about the actual term retarded in terms of medically.
Well, describe your
like,
scenario more,
okay.
because
Well,
that's
I
such an
mean,
arbitrary. Are you saying
okay,
we never
okay.
teach
So
them
they
to
would-
speak?
no, no,
we
they
have an animal in a cage.
No, I meant that they would have a disability, a terrible disability.
But that doesn't mental retardation come from genetic?
Okay, so no, I don't know about the term, but I mean that. Okay, so I don't know about the term. I'm not familiar with
Okay,
that.
so
but
you're saying that
I
somebody
meant
doesn't.
that they would have problems in their head.
They're taught to speak. Sorry.
No,
I get what you mean, as in their developmental.
Yeah,
the
they're,
logical-
yeah,
They would act
exactly.
more like a chimp, I guess. Probably.
No, I
This
think
is
it would
the
be
thing.
worse. I think they would be like close to catatonic or something.
Yeah, I
Really?
think
What, so like
Yeah.
when you were.
Do you mean born in isolation as a no stimuli?
Yeah.
So they
Only
only have their
fed
thoughts,
So
and
fed 'em was
they have like that they're cleaned somewhere.
but they have no external. So
Right,
everything.
so basically, just like keeping an animal in a cage.
The whole
like an animal
perception.
in the zoo.
No, but I think.
More
Do you mean as in
contained, but yeah.
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is a hypothetical situation where the only stimuli they have is their internal thought. There is nothing.
Yeah.
No, basically, it's only a priori knowledge. There is
Yeah,
nothing they
so-
gain from the
Yeah,
environment.
internal thought. They can think about who puts the box there, or where does my poop go every night, or
do
something
they
like that.
experience the language.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so
But they would
would
come up with it.
would they be able to think? As in, would they be
Yeah.
able to construct the logical
Yeah, I
arguments
mean,
in
I
their
think in a
mind of what
language,
would
right?
happen?
I couldn't imagine not thinking in a language.
Exactly.
Yeah, so what? Yeah, I think you're right that they
Yeah.
would have a very
Okay.
strange existence. I think a lot of
I'd love them just to start writing
us
mathematics
as
on
a
the wall.
person is our interaction
Yeah.
with society, and I think that a parent has a big, huge duty to a child in that they are basically responsible for
Well,
a
that-
lot of who that child becomes.
Language is a product of more than one being.
Yes, exactly. And this is
Yeah,
what I'm saying. I'm
absolutely,
saying that people and the emotional connections that we make with them are a very intrinsic part of our logical systems. Like, for example, our brains have decreased function if they don't have enough serotonin.
Yeah.
And if we have too much serotonin, we're really happy.
But language also makes us subjective in our perception of
Of
the
course. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that this emotional aspect of it is is very fundamental to what we say when we speak about logic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but this is what I was saying about the balance. We need to get it in moderation.
Okay.
That you can't let your logic. I would say out of the two, logic should prevail, but not in a whole dominating, overriding, overruling sense.
Mhm.
So if I were to come up to, if I had a moral dilemma,
Yeah.
then I would say both my logic and my emotions have developed off of each other. It's been a constant process throughout my life that they've influenced and they've interacted and influenced each other to get to where they are. Now, say I came across the girl and an adult man drowning, a child and an adult drowning. Which one do I save? Now, my heart might, in the abstract sense, might go for the girl, and then say I somehow knew statistically it would be much more successful. The survival rescue, the rescue attempt would be much more statistically supported if I went for the adult. I would hope that I've developed both my logic and my emotions in harmony, that they complement each other. That I would think, no, I have made I can go with my gut instinct, which would be my heart, and that would be the right decision because I've made sure both of them have been playing off each other, and that I always check and validate across.
Fair enough.
So you reach the balance that you know that there is no more discrepancy between the two, or if there is, you know very well how to analyze it and distinguish which one is
Okay.
the one.
But I don't think there are two. That's what I'm trying to say. I think it's one thought process that is based on your experience and your education. I don't think there is a logical side and a heartfelt side. I don't think anybody would ever go against their logic when they want to save a life, unless they somehow have reason to believe that their logic is flawed.
Well, or if you had
going against your logic to save a life.
what if you had
choose which life to go after.
So you have two children.
But I'd say the whole thing is...
That's the point, because, okay, so why would I want to save children? Because I believe...
No, say your own two kids.
Yeah.
And so, God forbid, I believe in them.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
You've got a house burning down, and then both your kids are in their respective bedrooms.
Yeah, I'm equal distance to both.
Which one? Yeah. How do you?
I would go quickest. That's what I think is the most logical
that's it,
thing.
You make a snap decision.
Yeah, so you make a snap decision.
You don't have to think about, stop, think.
Because it is the most effective way to do it. Because if I wait to try and decide which one, I'm decreasing the chance of survival for both of them.
But see, that's the thing.
But you're not thinking about
hindsight.
No, I'm not thinking about that at all. I just go after one.
Yeah.
In hindsight, you may make the wrong decision.
But in hindsight, but this is the thing. So to account for that, so say you just went with the quickest one,
and then
then in hindsight, so you only got one child and the other one died. In hindsight, there would, I imagine, to be a huge element of regret and guilt. But because you were objective, you've trained your mind to be objective prior to the incident happening, as in to get the balance between both. You can look back and say, no, because what I did was the most practical thing. Because if I went for the other child, that reduces the likelihood of either of them surviving. So even though it's not the ideal one, it was still the one for the greater good.
Okay, so I'm going to take this whole talk into a very weird direction, and you might not like it, but I would say that I made that decision because of my experiences on that day, because I had that child, for example, that room or that direction more. So I would have an explanation.
Just because you prefer right from left.
For example, it would be something like that made me go that way, right? And, okay, of course, the direction I'm talking about is, I don't know if you guessed it, but it's free will.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I do have free will or not. Whether I chose to go to that direction, was it me, or was it just because, I was turning right 5 times on the highway?
I think that goes to pragmatism. When you were saying about practical limits.
Yeah.
Not goes to exactly the same. You know when you said it was about Prime Minister?
Yeah.
And then you get to a practical limit where you lose it.
Yeah.
So, predestiny and free will.
It's okay, I get it.
Determinism and free will, I'd say, is a matter of perspective.
Okay.
So if I ran a simulation, if I let's say you were all guys in my little simulation, and
We are.
That's not what's happening.
this is the bit where I introduce that concept to you and then see what you guys do.
I've locked the door to the edge of the flat. Get out.
But yeah, so say I know exactly. Say I put in laws for your characters, and I know exactly how you. So it's like, okay, at event iteration 1060,
Fire.
just put all the numbers in. It's like, okay, they're all dependent on T, and T is 1060. So this is.
Yeah, I do need to.
So this is exactly what each of them will be, and I can predict. And if I said, and then say I came in to this simulation and said, hey, you all know me as Ridwan. Like, hey guys, you're going to do this next. You're going to do this next. You're going to do this next. And then you'd all, you could all argue. Well, as in that you can say the psychological thing of, well, to show control, I will do the opposite or whatever. But or if I just wrote down on a paper and in an envelope what you all did next, and then you all proceeded to do exactly what I said, but I didn't tell you that. And then if I showed you this envelope and said I predicted exactly what you'd all do, then from your perspective, it would be, no, we made that choice, and you just made a very good estimate, and you could have, maybe we are predictable in our behavior, but you didn't make us do it. It's just we chose that and came to these decisions by our own means.
Yeah.
And then I could say, well, actually, looking at from the other end of the simulation, you're all just following the laws that I've defined you to follow.
Yeah.
So
of
it's
course.
just a matter. So I would say, free will and determinism are just matters of perspective.
Well, no, it depends. It depends how you've constructed it. Because you could have constructed our characters, but equally you could have kind of just done it empirically. Like we could have pre-existed like this, and then you could have just gone, okay, well, having known you guys for this long, I can predict what you're going to do. So I would say it is.
Well,
it
that'd
is
be
different.
empirical.
Free will
No,
is different to.
Well, fundamentally, it's.
I mean, you're
Well,
saying
actually, I'd say no. I'd still say they could be. Free will could be the perception from within the simulation, and determinism is what's outside the simulation.
I could feel like I have free will now, but that's because I am here being me.
You're living your
Actually,
choices that
who's
I
to
have
say that I would
predetermined
ever
for
not?
you.
Yeah, I could have always been predestined to have these thoughts and believe I have free will when I don't.
It's kind of like just even with a kid in the classroom. Now, if you say, like if I said that none of you are going to be able to do this puzzle that I've put up on the board, and then they all proceed to do it and solve it, then they've all felt that they've actually exceeded out of their own choice to do so. And then I could turn it like, actually, it's just reverse psychology that I made by me saying that you've all done this. And that's a very simplistic
And
model.
the kids would go, what?
Wait, with the free will determinism thing, is that, can't I just be like quantum mechanics and then
Well,
disagree with that?
Well, that's
I-
a
you
hidden
can't-
variable.
We don't know yet.
Yeah,
'Cause, well,
but I think that
I
it
need
comes
to.
back to
Have you guys run into Bell's inequality?
We have heard of it,
Yes.
and
It's an
recently.
advanced quantum. If anyone's taking that,
Yeah,
well,
I'm
it
taking
was
that.
when we did.
Not yet, but I read about it in the back of Griffiths. It's
Yeah.
about the experiment with the two spins.
So this thing, I haven't actually read into it, and I want to because so apparently from what I've heard and if I've interpreted and understood correctly, Bell's inequality rules out hidden variables,
Yes.
which is to say then that it really is a random.
Indeterministic,
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember.
But there's still many who don't agree with that.
Oh yeah, I was
In
gonna
the
say
physics
it,
community.
But I think that there is first of all, quantum mechanics doesn't. You can't say quantum weirdness for everything, and I think that free will could still exist without, or our perception of free will could still exist without quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
Just
I just
based
brought up
on.
quantum mechanics to disagree with free will.
No,
Yeah,
it's a valid.
but
well,
yeah, I mean, we could
it's
still
a
have
good
free will
argument.
if everything was deterministic, just because of the chaotic nature and non-linear terms, really sensitive dependence on initial conditions. So one initial condition,
Yeah, but then
something changed slightly can have huge ramifications, and so therefore we can never be completely certain of the position of every single particle in the universe, and so there's always room for.
You could say the no hidden variables. Those are physically no hidden physical variables. Now, I'm not saying this in terms of playing the God card. I'm just saying that it could be physically there are no hidden variables, but that doesn't mean something else is still determining it. Which, yeah, someone could say is God. Or you could say, what if it's our free will that's shaping the universe as we see fit? Like that. I know that sounds far out, and it's probably not the case, as in highly unlikely. But this is a weird science bit. Years ago, as a kid, when the whole if I had superpower thing, I just thought, what if we all are like telekinetic, but the scales on which to act is actually billions and billions of light years out the way.
Yeah,
I
I had this similar thought when I was young as well.
There was a certain age when I was like 16, I was trying to move stuff with my head, and that's
I
true.
still do
The
that.
only thing
I
I
still
had
do that on a day-to-day basis. Like, I still think I have
One
a
day it's going to
superpower.
happen. It really is.
Yeah. No, but that means that I've moved a lot of really.
all I've had the planets have just been flung out. Because you're like,
We
class won't
killed-
move.
Oh my god, their
Billions of-
physics must be so weird.
It's like Galaxy external force.
That's really interesting.
No, that's it.
It's so interesting physics of that.
But anyway,
Cool.
two things. Firstly, Feynman writes really well about how we would still have the illusion of free will even if everything was deterministic and quantum mechanics didn't exist, so it's worth reading that. But also, secondly, Ali in his room with his two kids and his house burning down. I think that
Like,
you
no,
would,
it's you now. It was
Yeah,
first just generalized.
well, no, I'm gonna really do you in now because
Yeah.
I reckon if Ali was put in that situation 10,000 times in the exact same situation with the exact same conditions, you'd probably do different things each time.
Well,
Okay,
no, I
as
mean,
you
like, I
say.
think that,
Oh, the
agree.
exact same conditions.
I-
So you're saying there's something in my head that is
Or-
not
or-
reproducible.
Very, but or very again.
No, I would say
sensitive
like
dependence
the
on initial
whole.
conditions. I reckon you would have even if there's something that ever so slightly changed in your mind, like for instance, maybe you had turned left on the highway
Mm-hmm.
instead of right and taken a second longer to get home, or a tenth of a second
Well,
longer
that's
to
it,
eat your
we're
dinner or
constantly
something, then it
self-updating.
would be slightly different.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could change a tiny thing about the situation, and everything else was the same, and you would do.
Okay, yeah, exactly. But I'd
don't think
say
it'd be
that
exactly
if you
different.
change some things in the situation,
No,
it
maybe
would change.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. I think if it was exactly the same thing each time, I think
do you think like
Ali would still choose. And I know I'm saying choose.
the same thing?
I think if everything was exactly the same, you would do the same thing because your
Okay,
mind
so
is the
it's
one
in the
that's
same
making
state,
the
yeah.
decision.
But what I would say is, I would argue.
But I get what Matt
I
was
would,
getting
no,
at,
I would
think.
like to say if you
Well, I don't know.
No, but
yeah,
if you
it's
were to do this
interesting. Would you
scenario-
do the same
Wait,
thing?
let's say you run the scenario an infinite number of times. Okay. No,
Well, the rest of
Fine,
it, yeah.
let's
say
say
yeah.
fine up to very
One of
large.
the
Yeah.
lectures
Okay,
in
no,
physics
but
said the
what
same
I'm just
thing
trying to
each
say
time.
is, because if we assume quantum mechanics as we kind of know it is okay, there is like a non-zero. You can't determine exactly what things are going to do. So in your brain,
Quantum
things
mechanics
can
use
shift.
different things.
So like your decision making in your brain. I mean, if you assume that like all the particles in the room can go to one corner, for example,
Yeah.
then like in your brain you could have it because quantum mechanically you
Yeah,
can't predict
but
what
I
things
mean,
can do,
yeah.
you could have it shift. So I would argue that you would definitely, if you do that and some to
Okay.
infinity times, I would say you would make a different decision.
Yeah, but infinity
based on
times
quantum
means more
mechanics.
than the sun is going to live, or something
No, but
like
I just
that.
mean,
But
I
I
No,
know
again, just
you're
in
saying
terms
it's
of no
probable.
limit.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
implying that if you do it 2 times, then that's much more reasonable that you can set up the same thing.
Yeah.
in case-
Even
Yeah.
just 2 times or an infinite times, you could do a different. Quantum mechanically speaking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I.
You
That's
could
just what I'm
do-
trying to
Yeah,
say.
but the could is very important. The could is like 90 and like 10 or something like that, or like bigger.
Yeah.
So it's
But it's still
I mean, I could be
yeah,
arbitrarily
it's still
larger,
possible,
yeah.
but
I'm
that's
just saying like it's
I
possible.
don't know, but
okay,
that's the
but
thing.
that
As soon
doesn't
as you
leave
start
room
accepting
for free
probability-
will. That just leaves room for a different set of circumstances.
Yeah.
You know,
No, this is the thing. So this is what I was saying when Max said if you did the same thing and everything was exactly the same,
mhm.
you would make the same choice. That's what I would think.
Yeah.
Because your mind, if we're saying that your mind is responsible for your actions,
Yeah.
that's exactly the same in every case. So you would do the same thing. In terms of quantum mechanics, but then that's going on to the nature of the mind. Now, if we're deterministic beings, then quantum mechanics would effectively change your state of mind, which is why you would do different actions.
So what I would say maybe is like on a more practical level, maybe we have free will an arbitrarily large percentage of the time, but not exactly 100, right? So maybe we do have free will.
I say
So,
it's
like
perception.
or free will.
And then so I perceive it.
I take
as
a
long
free
as
will
I-
just to mean making the decision for going left or right or whatever.
Yeah, but as in that's the thing. I take it as I acknowledge that.
It feels that way.
Yeah, at the very least, it's a sensation. Whether I wouldn't say it's absolutely the case that I definitely have free will, because for all I know, every action I've made has been determined, and so well,
I don't think
to be honest. So I will relate this to Islam, just because this is one of the things that I had thought about quite a bit. It was a case of, if God knows what you're going to do, why are we living our lives out here? And then it's a case of, well, say you just suddenly into existence and you're in hell. You're perceiving hell, but and then this goes on to the whole, well, why would you even be in heaven or hell anyway? Which is another discussion. But if I just suddenly, God forbid, appeared in hell, then I think, well, why am I subject to this? Why am I subjected to this punishment, to hell, this great torment? Then, by living out my life, I've understood all the choices that I have made from my point of view, and then I understand. So even though it was all predetermined, you could say, well, you're always going to end up in hell anyway, but now you understand why, because you've actually gone through the system.
So what's the point of why would a god create humans to kind of be determined to think in a certain way and then watch them play out their lives, and reward or punish them based on how he created them?
No, exactly. So this is the thing.
Or am I misunderstanding them?
No. As in, that's the thing.
Just
So
an intersection.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to leave in like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
What time is it?
It's like 10 to 10.
Is this when everyone has to leave? It's fine.
I might. Yeah, I do
Well, you
need
have
to
to, like-
leave in a little bit. But
I can go walk if you guys don't want to leave. It's fine.
Um,
no, I want to drive back to school tonight, so that's fine.
but the whole that's the thing. So another thing from that, I thought, well, what if,
It seems
as
very.
far as my awareness
I mean,
is,
if you-
I'm the only certain existence. My consciousness is the only certain thing. So, and I'm not saying this is the case, but as far as I am not concerned but aware, what if all of this is just from my understanding? So,
Okay, so then I kind of see where you're coming from. So then, if the sum total of if it's like, if this is kind of, this universe is created as like an experiment for you, essentially, then so you start out and then your opinions are based on a combination of nature and nurture, right? So, like who you are is based on a combination. If I say nature and nurture, so it's a combination of who you are when you're born plus your environment. If you're controlling both who you are when you're born and your environment, then aren't you like just a predetermined creature who's going to behave exactly the same way? So what's the point of?
but I think it's the perspective. So,
What's the point of making you and making this world around you? Like why bother? Because I just know exactly how you're going to behave.
that's the thing, but what if it's awareness?
What do you mean?
As in, so I don't know. This is all speculation.
Yeah,
This
sure.
So this is what I'm trying to still figure out. And
But I
this
mean,
is
to
why
me,
I
it sounds
don't
like
know.
what's going to happen is just like running a computer program and then being like, okay, well, if it ends up like this, then I will be very unhappy, and if it ends up like this, I'll be happy. But
Yeah,
it's like a
but-
predetermined thing. The computer program has
As
no
a-
say in the matter because you define
Yeah.
all of the conditions.
But as in, what if, in a very subjective way, the beauty of it is my awareness. So say I made a
So say
computer
you go,
program.
okay, so you're kind of like beating the system and saying,
Well,
I realize that this is all.
No, but say your computer program is like, why am I going
So like
to
halfway
hell?
through running through this integration, it's like, hang on a minute, I have a computer program.
No, the computer. Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
thing. So
Is that,
what if?
is that what it's?
Because say the whole computer program analogy thing.
Yeah.
That if I'm the programmer and I just write a computer program and I think it's just it's completely artificial, it's a construct. And I'm not saying this is how I think of. I'm just saying using it as an analogy. Then whatever program I write, if I like make a really bad script with loads of bugs in it, then as a programmer, no one is going to say to me, like, no one here would say, that's really unethical what you've just done. I mean, why would you make, like, it's inefficient, but you wouldn't say, you should feel bad. As in that's
You've
that's
subjected
horrible
that
to the bite.
computers as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
But the thing is, then say I've made a script and I know that if I did a Monte Carlo simulation and said I had two cars doing their parts, and I said this car is going to crash in my computer simulation, and I've calculated it to do that, and this car is going to get to the end of the road. Again, from the programmer level point of view, like it's just a computer program. Right? I see what you're doing. You're seeing how it goes. No, there's no ethical issue there. As far as I'm aware, people might have issues with writing programs like that. But then what if there was an element of giving awareness to that computer program, that self-awareness to understand its own existence, whether it was a case of now the computer program itself might start constructing its own notions of good and bad and say, getting to the road is the goal, I will say that is good, crashing is bad. And then if it has been written to crash, then it would think, well, this is really bad. Why is my life like this? But from the programmer's point of view, and again, I'm not saying this is how God it. It's just speculation. What if it's just a case of the beauty of it is the self-awareness that, yes, you could argue that this is that's harsh on that car and that's good on that car. But what if it's just the fact that they can, for this brief moment, they can just become self-aware? This is a very I've just come up with this on the spot, so I'm going to have to mull over this quite a bit. But just that. What if the beauty of it is the living, the perspective, the consciousness itself, rather than just say we're saying free will is soul. We'll just say for now. Then if you took the soul out and we're still deterministic beings, we would still do. You could say that. Well, then everything we do is exactly the same, but we just wouldn't perceive it because we're not there. And then you put in the free will, the perspective, the consciousness, and we still do exactly everything that we would, but we associate it to ourselves and say, this is me living life, rather than that's just the body following laws of physics and instinct that have all been pre-programmed into it by a deterministic universe.
But I'm with you in that I think you can have an awareness without necessarily free will. So you could live a completely deterministic life and still be completely aware, but think that you've got free will even if you don't. And I could be completely aware and develop language and think for myself, but still have it all completely, still live in a completely deterministic universe.
You could say it's just emotions, I guess, in terms of, because you can trick the senses, and then I could trick myself.
I had the realization a while ago that when you're writing a program, you're making the electrons behave in a certain way, and all you're doing is just really making atoms move in a certain way, and it's like, well, that's what all you're doing to other people. I mean, people are just bags of chemicals. Like, why is a person any more special than
it's the meaning
program?
we give to things. Yeah. As in that's one argument you could have. That what if all of this is just, because I am only certain of my consciousness, then that is what I put all my stock in, and that's what I try to relate everything to, because that is the only true certainty I have. So I always try and relate things back to how does this fit in with my perception. So the fact that, say, if I am just the hypothetical brain in a vat, then this universe all makes sense in my mind, and it relates back to me in terms of me saying, okay, well, this makes sense if this is how the universe is constructed. These walls are here, these people are here, I see these colors, and these all obey these laws of physics. So everything makes sense, because if it was all random and I walked into the next room and it was a completely different universe of how I perceived it, that wouldn't sit well with my mind, as far as I'm aware.
But what if, okay,
Yeah.
What if you are as sure as of your consciousness as you are as anything else?
Do you mean the other way? Well, as in, I'm always sure of my consciousness.
Okay, how do you know that?
Because I perceive. That's the only thing.
Because you perceive, exactly.
Yeah.
So what about the dude who we just trapped in a room with a box being fed?
There'll still be.
He's still there.
You think so?
Yeah.
they might not develop the cognitive
Yeah, but how do you know
awareness
it's there?
of self, but because they will still respond to everything. Like, so say you shut off all external stimuli, so they didn't even food, like they would somehow still maintain healthy and all of that, but it was just completely internal, like everything was a priori. Then they would still have that perspective.
A baby would still cry in discomfort, or because they wanted food if they had been deprived of food.
Well, but I'd say that's still kind of. I get where you're going, but
Yeah,
in terms of that's still external stimuli, and I'm just thinking, if you had a hypothetical, just a mind, it would have consciousness. It would have that awareness of being.
I think maybe
Would you object to that experiment being carried out?
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
How
I think
would
it's
you-
very unethical, but
How would you?
hypothetically. Yeah,
No,
I'm not
no,
sure. I think
the
you're
mind
pushing
doesn't
the limit.
destroying.
No,
Because that's one of the great
I'm not giving my opinion.
ethical debate. Is,
Growing a brain?
no. As in, if you just had someone born and then just isolated them,
Oh,
just cut them
Yeah,
off,
yeah,
see
that's
exactly what they can.
No,
do.
the
What I'm
risk
saying
is
is,
too high.
would you?
the risk is too
What
high.
risk?
Risk of hurting another human being.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but as
So
a
then
thought
you could say
experiment,
for
quite
the
a nice
greater
thought
good.
experiment.
There is no greater good. That's the greater good is your fellow man.
I don't know,
Or
but then
woman.
what if people say, well, we could find out fundamentals of the human condition, and thereby this would, by making this sacrifice, the knowledge for the record I'm negating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The knowledge and
Yeah,
information.
but like you
we
could
glean
argue
from
like, what if the
is-
happiness gained by people in the future, if you know that extra knowledge, if that was going to make people more happy than this person would be unhappy.
Well, if you
does that
have
make
such
sense?
a great insight, then you probably can find a better way to do it.
Yeah, and you'd
Yeah,
never
but what if
find
you could
out
only
what.
get that insight
yeah.
by doing this?
Then you
experiment?
don't do it because
But you wouldn't have the awareness of
No, no,
the
no,
no,
thing
no,
no,
anyway.
so-
I mean,
It's the
I'm just,
So you wouldn't.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
I'm
no,
against
no,
it as well.
fine.
But I'm just saying, like, what if that's the only way to advance? Like, if you have to kind of sacrifice, what is
You're
I mean,
not
arguably, what
advancing.
is one person versus
See,
the
this is what I was
advancement of the
saying
entire?
about the greater good.
Yeah,
that
you're
you
not
can't set
advancing.
back.
Yeah. Because
But like, how precious is life? Like,
You know,
as
I
it
guess
is-
ultimately
as it
that's
is
all,
for
yeah.
each and every one of us.
yeah, ultimately, it's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I would be against that.
Oh yeah, I'm
Experiment actually taking
horrifically against that, but I mean,
No, I
it's
think.
still interesting, right?
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah,
I think if
these are
somebody's
why
going,
we
if you're
consider
going to sacrifice something for the greater good, for instance, sacrifice people for the greater good, and I think that those people have to have the choice now to sacrifice.
No, no,
I
it's the
think-
thing. Just
which-
by asking that question, it's the whole case of. So you could say, this is what bothers me when some people say, well, it's never going to happen, so there's no point considering it.
No.
But by considering it, we
You think
learn more
about
about
everything.
ourselves.
Yeah,
we can
How do
consider.
you know whether
That's
it's
the
going to
whole
happen or
point
not
of the thought.
if you don't consider it?
Well, no,
That's what I
but
would
that's it. It's a whole thought experiment, and you don't have to have a physical empirical experiment to be able to discuss hypothetical logical considerations,
I would say if it's never,
which is
If-
what
if
the
it's
whole kind of
physically
physics and metaphysics
Yeah.
argument thing. I
I
think.
would say like if it's impossible to do, if it's impossible to do this test, then I would say it's worth considering.
It's still worth considering. As in, if it, what do you mean physically impossible?
Yeah, it's
I'd say it's still worth considering.
So you would physically.
Well,
you would consider
like, why
things-
do we ask? Is there a God? You could be saying, well, there's no point asking that. But then you could say,
Well, I mean, this is kind of what I was arguing about when it comes to all that. Where it's like, well, I think that's not like a testable thing, so I don't think it's valid.
oh, but that's in terms of a physical universe.
Yeah.
Then
so
yeah,
it's
you
just
could
like
say it's not. But yeah,
empirical versus.
but yeah.
I know. I guess it's worth asking questions even if they're unsolvable, or at least because maybe even just to the fact that we just don't, we think they might be unsolvable now, but future evidence might suggest that it is solvable. Which means it's worth thinking.
Well, if you're saying it's a purely empirical a physical universe.
That's how I like it. That's how I deal with these.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
but-
that that's.
No, I
Yeah.
But if you're saying it's a purely physical universe, then it makes sense. I would say it makes sense to say, well, there's no point asking about things that cannot be physically tested, because if you're saying everything everything is physical, then why would you go beyond that scope?
Okay, but
But if you're not saying, oh, well, I would say that if you're saying it's, you don't know if it is just a physical thing or if there's something beyond or transcending the physical, then that's why we ask the questions that
Yeah,
cannot be physically
exactly, and if you think of it in a much more physical way, which is when you think of a thought that you've never thought before, you're creating you
Are
know,
we
somewhat.
capable of doing?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, like,
No,
somewhat. You're creating a new neural pattern in your head. And that neural pattern, may be useful in other types of
It
thinking.
opens up.
Yeah, and that's basically why we have thought experiments, is because we want to
Yeah, it opens
have
up
that
more
to understand
questions. Yeah,
something
okay.
else.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, but sometimes it's like useful.
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of like if it doesn't help, if it's a completely pointless question to ask in the sense that it will never help anything else, then it's not worth asking. But it's impossible to say that about something because you haven't thought about it. So
I mean,
Interestingly,
yeah.
that's why I say
okay, so yes, so then on that basis, yeah, it's worth thinking about things we never thought about before.
on a
So we
much
can't know.
smaller scale
Yeah.
and closer to personal scales.
Yeah.
It's gossip. When
Yeah.
people ask that, I think that's an irrelevant question. As in, what? So if someone said, "Oh, hey Ali, what did you and so do yesterday?" And as in, if it's say like your personal relationship, someone just asks you about the intimate details. What purpose? What practical purpose does that have? I would say no. You can't rule it out 100%.
Human curiosity.
But that's the thing. See those. So I disagree with saying. Okay, so I think there are no. It's never wrong to question, but what you question should be reasonable. As in what your question is should be reasoned. So if I said, like, you get so many pointless
Is
questions.
curiosity itself not a valid reason for asking a
Curiosity is,
What
but
does
you
green
can
taste
you can
like?
measure it though. But you can
Yes.
still measure your curiosity. So if I was to say, "Oh, I wonder how Ali's personal, intimate life is," and then Ali could say, "Well, I could tell you, but first, can you justify to me what relevance this has
What
on
if
your
I tell
life?"
you I will feel closer to you if you tell me?
Well, no.
Wait, if you tell Ali?
Yeah, because that's why you gossip, because you want to develop relationships with the person
Is
that
it?
you
That's
gossip.
what
I think so.
I'd say, well, I don't know. I'd say gossip is. It could be that, but I'd say one of the other reasons for gossip, at least,
Natural
would be, well, it would just be self-validation to make yourself feel better. Because the more you know about
Well, yeah,
the
and if you
situation,
manage to make yourself better with that person, then that's how you develop relationships anyway, isn't
Yeah.
it?
But sometimes you can ask
but you
questions
can say
which like
pointless
you know you
gossip.
don't want to know the
Oh,
answer to.
No, so when I say gossip, I mean as in,
know.
did you hear that Ali did this last night and so, or the other day Ali wore this kind of clothes. It's like, what relevance does that have?
Alright, yeah,
And
that's
this is much more a pragmatic,
Yeah.
grumpy old man.
So that's you and me talking with Ali, not in a room. Yeah, I would say that talking to other people about their lives.
Yeah,
is
so
a
if
good
someone
thing
says to me, like if someone said, for example, did Ali ask you about what I got up to yesterday? I would say, well, if you want to know if Ali asked me that, ask Ali. Now, if you were saying, did I tell Ali something, then yeah, by all means ask me because I am the subject, I am the object. So, as in terms of subject, and object.
Yeah, I know.
So in terms of, yeah, by all means ask me. But when it's a case of just gossip in that sense, by the social convention of gossip, then I think that's a very irrelevant byproduct of society.
Probably.
But I would say
But
that
it's fun.
it's okay
interesting.
for
If
me
you
to
find
ask
something
Ali what
interesting,
he
then it's more it's valid as any other form
did
of
you have a
entertainment.
good
Is it?
weekend? Is a very nice thing to do.
I disagree with that because that's
Right.
interest for the sake of interest. As in that's saying,
I mean, it's interesting.
because if I ask about someone else's business,
Yeah.
again, this is whole subject.
You're asking about Tron's business.
Right. Guys,
Yeah.
I have to leave.
Yeah,
So I shall.
I'm going to make a move as well, so I
Are you
can
gonna
give you the.
Cool. No,
Sorry for the.
no. That's it was.
No.
This is a
You
much
asked
more
enough questions
manageable
about my
one.
personal life. I'm out of here. 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 I'm out of here.